What if a single billionaire could disrupt 160 years of American political tradition with just a few dozen candidates? What if, in a nation gridlocked by partisan warfare, a rogue third party suddenly became the deciding voice on every major issue, from defense spending to AI regulation, from climate legislation to the national debt ceiling? Welcome to What If Horizons. I'm your host, and today, we examine a provocative new question. What if Elon Musk's America Party breaks the two-party system and seizes control of the balance of power in Congress? The idea sounds like political fiction until it doesn't. Just weeks ago, Elon Musk announced via his X platform, formerly Twitter, that he is officially forming a political party called the America Party. In a now viral post that garnered over 1.2 million poll responses, Musk declared his intent to reboot American governance by backing a slate of hyper-focused candidates in both the Senate and the House. The goal? Not to win the White House, not to take over Congress, but to become the deciding bloc. A coalition of perhaps just a dozen elected officials who, by virtue of razor-thin margins in both chambers, could force every piece of legislation through their filter. Think about that for a moment. America's deeply divided Congress already hangs in a fragile balance. The House swings with single-digit majorities. The Senate teeters at 50-50 with the vice president breaking ties. Now imagine a handful of newcomers, each aligned with Musk's vision of technological acceleration, fiscal restraint, deregulation, and what he calls rational centrism, entering that arena with the power to tip the scales. Not one party, not the other, but a third force, branded by the world's most famous billionaire, wedging itself between left and right. This isn't a fantasy plucked from a science fiction script. The groundwork is real and already underway. Internal documents leaked to tech journalists reveal that Musk's campaign team has already identified 8 to 10 House districts where incumbents have razor-thin margins, little fundraising strength, and high dissatisfaction among independent voters. States like Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, and even parts of upstate New York are reportedly under analysis. For the Senate, the focus is even more surgical. Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin, swing states with recent history of split-ticket voting and exhausted electorates, are prime targets. Musk's America Party, as outlined in a sparse but pointed mission brief on X, is not running as left or right, but forward. Its platform is based around 4 pillars: technological leadership, fiscal discipline, institutional transparency, and constitutional restoration. That last term has already drawn both applause and alarm, depending on who you ask. Supporters see it as a rebuke to what Musk calls bureaucratic capture and legislative cowardice. Critics say it's billionaire code for gutting oversight, weakening labor protections, and deregulating with impunity. But the central premise of Musk's strategy isn't ideological, it's structural. He's not trying to win a majority. He's trying to own the hinge. In other words, he's betting that with just a dozen seats, he can hold the rest of Congress hostage. That every bill, every budget, every international treaty or emergency act will need to pass through the narrow keyhole of the America Party's consent. As Musk put it in a now-pinned tweet, 1 vote in a deadlocked Senate is worth more than 30 in a landslide. Leverage is the name of the game. To many, this is a stroke of strategic genius. To others, it's an existential threat to American democracy. In the rest of this episode, we'll unpack how this scenario could realistically unfold, how third-party movements usually fail, why this one might not, and what happens to congressional governance, fiscal policy, global diplomacy, and even the structure of the 2 dominant parties if the America Party actually succeeds. Could this be a cleansing wave of reform, or just chaos in a new costume? But before we jump into the moving parts, let's pause and understand the current playing field. How broken is the system Musk seeks to interrupt? What's the real status of American governance in 2026? How fertile is the soil for a political outsider to take root? Not from within, but from between the 2 parties. To understand the gravity of what Elon Musk is attempting with the America Party, we need to take a hard look at the political battlefield as it stands. The 2026 midterms are fast approaching, and American democracy is in what many describe as a constitutional drift, a phase where polarization has calcified, but trust in the 2 dominant parties is eroding faster than ever. Both the Democrats and Republicans are internally fragmented. The Democratic Party is split between progressives pushing for aggressive climate, labor, and equity policies, and centrists who fear alienating moderates and independents. On the Republican side, the post-Trump identity crisis continues to fester. Hardline populists dominate the discourse, while traditional conservatives find themselves increasingly marginalized or sidelined. Congress, as a result, is no longer a place of compromise. It's become a performance stage for base politics. Votes are symbolic. Filibusters are frequent. Budget negotiations now happen under threat of shutdowns, sometimes multiple times per year. This is the arena into which Musk is stepping, not with a full army, but with a scalpel. He doesn't need to field 435 House candidates or 50 Senate hopefuls. He only needs a sliver. According to internal party planning materials shared on X Spaces and later reported by Axios, the America Party is targeting 2 to 3 Senate seats and 8 to 10 House districts. These aren't random battlegrounds. They're calculated pressure points. Places where incumbents have worn out their welcome, where local media markets can be saturated with digital advertising, and where Musk's personal brand still carries enough trust to pull in independent voters. Take, for instance, the Senate seat in Georgia, where razor-thin margins decided the past 3 cycles. Or Michigan, where disillusionment with both parties is growing, especially among young voters and disaffected centrists. The America Party has reportedly conducted extensive polling in these areas, measuring not just party preference, but trust in institutions, concern over national debt, and appetite for tech-driven government solutions. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike most third-party efforts in American history, which either try to win the presidency or become protest movements, Musk's vision is rooted in leverage, not dominance. The America Party doesn't seek to replace Democrats or Republicans. It wants to be the indispensable swing bloc. Think of it as a functional filibuster, a group just large enough to block or pass any major legislation depending on its alignment. In a 51 to 49 Senate or a 219 to 216 House, 1 or 2 seats are everything. That's where Musk plans to insert the wedge. Of course, history is littered with the corpses of failed third parties. Ross Perot, Ralph Nader, Jill Stein. None were able to crack the institutional armor of America's winner-take-all electoral system. The Electoral College, the first-past-the-post model, and stringent ballot access laws all conspire against outsiders. But Musk's campaign isn't running nationally. It's surgical. He's bypassing traditional state party structures and investing directly into digital-first campaigns, using his X platform to raise funds, spotlight candidates, and bypass media gatekeeping. And unlike past insurgents, he has more than just a message. He has the infrastructure, billions in personal capital, a direct channel to tens of millions of followers, and influence across media, finance, and tech ecosystems. In many ways, the America Party is not just a political vehicle. It's a media operation, a crowdfunding platform, and a governance experiment wrapped into one. There are already whispers that candidates aligned with Musk are being quietly recruited from within the tech world. Former engineers, crypto entrepreneurs, even policy leads from SpaceX and Tesla. Their pitch, not left or right, but forward. A future-oriented brand of pragmatism that prioritizes long-term national stability, technological competitiveness, and institutional overhaul. Their biggest promise, no more partisan grandstanding, just results. Critics argue this is naive at best and authoritarian at worst. Can a political party run like a startup? Should governance follow the same rules as product management? Can the freewheeling logic of Silicon Valley survive the scrutiny of democratic process? Supporters, however, are listening. A recent Pew poll showed that 42% of Americans would consider voting for a well-organized third party if it meant ending gridlock. Among independents, that number jumps to 59%. Among Gen Z voters, it's even higher. And so, the stage is set. A disillusioned electorate. A polarized Congress. An ultra-wealthy, highly polarizing tech mogul with the resources, reach, and radical ambition to inject chaos, or clarity, into a broken system. Next, we'll explore what actually happens if the America Party succeeds, if it picks up key House and Senate seats, and suddenly holds the balance of power in Washington. How does the machinery of Congress respond when a new political force enters the mix? Not with a full caucus, but just enough seats to make or break any bill that matters. Let's find out. Imagine it's the morning after the 2026 midterms. The headlines aren't about red waves or blue walls. They're about the gray disruptors who just reshaped the U.S. Congress. The America Party, a political startup less than 2 years old, has pulled off the impossible. With just 3 Senate seats and 9 House victories, Elon Musk's faction now holds the balance of power in both chambers. In the Senate, their votes are essential to break any 48-49 deadlock. In the House, they form a critical swing block, enough to determine whether a budget passes, whether a speaker survives, or whether a major policy initiative even makes it to the floor. The balance of power has shifted, not to a president, not to a party, but to a handful of newcomers with no political lineage and no loyalty to old alliances. And America is watching with a mix of awe, confusion, and dread. Let's break it down. First, the Senate. Suppose the balance stands at 48 Democrats, 49 Republicans, and 3 America Party senators. Suddenly, every confirmation, judicial nominees, cabinet appointments, military leaders, requires their blessing. Want to raise the debt ceiling? You'll need their votes. Planning to fund Ukraine or pass a national AI regulation? Better call Austin, the newly elected tech entrepreneur from Nevada who rode a wave of Musk endorsements to an upset victory over a veteran Democrat. The Senate Majority Leader, be it Schumer or a GOP successor, can't schedule a vote without first checking if the America Party agrees. And what's their agenda? It's not traditional. These lawmakers are not wedded to conservative or progressive dogma. One of them might champion universal basic income using carbon dividends. Another may demand a balanced budget amendment before approving any new spending. A third might push for federal deregulation of crypto or establish a digital citizen ID as a prerequisite for federal benefits. Some of it sounds futuristic. Some of it sounds libertarian. All of it disrupts the legislative status quo. In the House, things are even more volatile. 9 seats may sound small, but in a chamber where the balance between the parties is often razor-thin, say, 221 to 214, that block becomes kingmaker. No speaker can be elected without their nod. No omnibus bill can pass without their thumbs up. What used to be intra-party horse trading now requires coordination with a group that owes allegiance to neither McCarthy nor Jeffries, but to a platform called X and a set of ideological principles driven by algorithms, not party committees. The immediate effect is chaos. The House Speaker, let's assume it's a weakened McCarthy 2.0 or a centrist Democrat in a power-sharing arrangement, finds themselves negotiating every clause of every bill with a group that operates more like a venture board than a congressional caucus. Some America Party members refuse to accept earmarks. Others demand line-item transparency. They don't attend party retreats or play ball with the media. Instead, they post live-streamed policy stand-ups each week to their millions of X followers, crowdsourcing amendments and leveraging polls to decide votes. Journalists scramble to understand who's really in charge. Committee hearings become unpredictable. One moment a member is grilling a defense contractor over wasteful spending. The next they're proposing legislation to automate Social Security Administration using blockchain. Traditional lobbyists don't know where to turn. K Street firms that once operated with bipartisan roadmaps now find themselves pitching to former software developers fluent in Python, but cold to political flattery. The executive branch is no less affected. The White House finds its legislative strategy hostage to a group that's not beholden to the usual norms. Want to pass a climate bill? You'll need to prove its ROI in under 5 years. Want to approve military aid to Taiwan? Be ready to publicly share cybersecurity readiness assessments with a group that demands data over diplomacy. The America Party's demands aren't always ideological, but they're always unorthodox. Critics begin to question the democratic legitimacy of a party so small, so new, and so billionaire-backed. Editorials from The Atlantic to the National Review ask whether this is governance or plutocracy. Is it democracy-enhancing or corrosive? Social media erupts with debates. Is this the end of the two-party system? Are we witnessing the rise of techno-authoritarian centrism? Meanwhile, some Americans cheer. For the first time in decades, Congress is passing bills that weren't written by special interest groups. There's real debate, real accountability. Some of it looks like chaos, but some of it, surprisingly, works. This is the kingmaker scenario Musk has long hinted at. Not mass revolution, not a third-party presidency, just enough influence to tip the scales. A political movement agile enough to disrupt both the establishment and the fringes. And unlike the Tea Party or the Squad, the America Party isn't a wing within a larger apparatus. It's an independent nucleus in a fractured system. Yet power comes with risk. The more influence they wield, the more likely they become the focus of backlash. Progressive activists mobilize against what they call billionaire veto power. Conservatives warn of cultural technocrats hijacking governance. Every vote becomes high stakes. Every compromise a potential betrayal. The spotlight intensifies. Can this group hold together? Can it evolve from a disruption experiment into a sustainable political force? In next part, we'll examine that very question. What happens next, within the walls of Congress, inside the America Party itself, and across the country, as this new power bloc navigates its first term with America's legislative balance in its hands? So now the America Party holds the keys to power, or at least the power to lock and unlock the doors of Congress. But governance is a very different game from campaigning. And what looked sleek and visionary on the campaign trail quickly collides with the jagged machinery of legislation, bureaucracy, and public scrutiny. How does a faction built on speed, disruption, and algorithmic clarity adapt to a system designed for slowness, compromise, and ambiguity? First, let's explore how this power dynamic begins to manifest. The first budget cycle after the America Party's rise becomes a battlefield. The federal government is approaching its spending cap, and a shutdown looms unless a budget can pass both chambers. The America Party, true to its public promise, refuses to vote for any omnibus bill that doesn't include a 10-year debt stabilization plan, sunset clauses for major federal programs, and real-time public expenditure dashboards. That's right, they demand a literal web dashboard showing where every dollar goes, updated daily. To many in the Democratic and Republican camps, this is insanity. You can't run a government like a tech platform. One longtime appropriations staffer is overheard saying, "That's not how appropriations work." But the America Party lawmakers don't blink. They hold the line, refuse all backdoor negotiations, and instead live-stream their meetings, tweeting out real-time policy proposals and letting their followers vote on amendments via blockchain-verified polls. The public watches this budget standoff with equal parts horror and fascination. Supporters celebrate the transparency. Detractors warn that governance by social media is destabilizing and undermines the seriousness of the legislative process. Some even invoke comparisons to the Roman Senate's final years, where theatrical populism replaced pragmatic statecraft. Behind closed doors, both parties begin to fracture. A handful of centrist Democrats are quietly intrigued by the America Party's demand for fiscal responsibility and data transparency. A few GOP members, especially those aligned with younger, libertarian voters, begin to caucus informally with the newcomers. In less than a year, traditional caucus boundaries start to blur. A new kind of power center is emerging, not based on ideology, but on systems thinking. But internal cohesion in the America Party is fragile. Remember, these lawmakers didn't come from the same political tradition. Some are former engineers. Others are radical decentralists. One senator from Texas refuses to vote for any bill that doesn't sunset within 5 years. Another representative from Oregon demands universal basic income funded by a carbon tax. They agree on transparency, technological modernization, and anti-corruption, but beyond that, they diverge. Fast. Musk himself, now functioning more as a spiritual leader than a formal party chair, tries to arbitrate the tensions through X-town halls. He invites all members of Congress to join in public debates, live-streamed weekly. Some show up, others boycott. The media, meanwhile, is still trying to define what exactly this movement is. Is it a populist tech insurrection? A libertarian technocracy? A Silicon Valley cult? Or is it, perhaps for the first time in decades, a genuine third rail injected into America's broken political circuitry? Things come to a head during the debate over an emergency defense bill tied to Ukraine and Taiwan. The White House wants swift authorization of $78 billion. The America Party demands full auditability of every dollar, along with a national referendum before any deployment of U.S. troops overseas. The rest of Congress is stunned. Referendums on foreign policy? In Washington, the America Party doesn't back down. They propose a blockchain-based voting system to let U.S. citizens directly weigh in on major foreign aid packages. It's a constitutional non-starter, but it sparks a national conversation about participatory governance, digital trust, and citizen engagement. Even as their proposal fails procedurally, it dominates headlines for weeks. Cable pundits rage. Talk radio erupts. But young voters listen. What begins to emerge is a new model of legislative power. The America Party doesn't control the House or Senate, but it controls the narrative. It sets the tone. It introduces the bills no one else dares to. And even when those bills fail, the ideas behind them ripple outward. In tech terms, they're pushing policy updates in rapid cycles, forcing the old system to react. Yet all is not stable within. By the end of their first year, 2 America Party members publicly split from the group, citing ideological incoherence and decision-making by algorithm. One joins the Democrats. Another becomes an independent. Musk posts cryptically about inevitable forking. The media smells blood. Is the party fracturing? To some extent, yes. But unlike traditional parties, the America Party embraces modularity. Their own bylaws permit internal divergence and even platform forks. In a strange way, they've designed their party more like an open-source software project than a political machine. If factions emerge, they don't fight them, they integrate, or let them go. Adaptation, not uniformity, is the ethos. But this comes with a cost. In the 2027 special elections, the party loses 2 House seats. Voters in swing districts cite chaos and lack of stability as reasons. Traditional parties feel vindicated. They argue that disruption for disruption's sake has consequences. The America Party regroups, this time with a sharper focus on policy deliverables, better candidate vetting, and coalition building. Still, the experiment continues. By now, America is different. Every major party is revisiting its digital strategy. Transparency bills gain bipartisan support. Campaign finance reform is no longer a fringe issue. It's front and center. Even the Congressional Budget Office begins working on real-time data dashboards. The question now isn't whether the America Party will survive. It's whether its ideas have already outlived it. Has the disruption it caused fundamentally altered the way Americans think about governance, representation, and civic participation? Coming up, we'll turn outward. How does this internal disruption in U.S. governance begin to ripple across global policy, from foreign aid and trade agreements to climate diplomacy and AI regulation? What happens when America's internal software update starts pushing changes to the rest of the world? With the America Party now an undeniable fixture in Congress, even if volatile, the ripple effects begin to travel far beyond Capitol Hill. Foreign leaders, diplomats, and technocrats around the globe start recalibrating, not because the party holds a majority, but because it holds unpredictability. And in geopolitics, uncertainty at the heart of American power reshapes everything. Let's begin with fiscal policy. In the months following the America Party's leverage over the federal budget, the U.S. enacts a real-time spending disclosure platform. It's clunky at first, half-finished APIs, delayed uploads, the usual bureaucratic bottlenecks. But it exists. For the first time, allies and rivals alike can see what the U.S. government is doing with its money, practically in real time. Defense spending, humanitarian aid, agency budgets, it's all out in the open. Now picture being a leader in Brussels, Ottawa, or Seoul. You're used to negotiating trade agreements, foreign aid, or joint military exercises with Washington in private, strategic terms. Suddenly, your deal may become a public item in a dashboard viewed by millions. That changes how diplomacy is done. Nations begin adjusting their own strategies, not to align with Musk's ideology, but to account for his movement's impact on American governance. Next, we look at foreign policy. The America Party caucus has repeatedly demanded stricter conditions on foreign aid, emphasizing transparency, sunset clauses, and tangible returns on investment. A proposed aid package to Ukraine is delayed for 3 weeks as America Party lawmakers demand an independently audited breakdown of how past funds were used. It's not sabotage, it's accountability, they argue. But it slows diplomacy and frustrates allies, especially in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, in Asia, China takes note. Beijing had grown accustomed to American predictability. Even when divided domestically, Washington still functioned in international relations. But with the America Party calling for referendums before troop deployments and openly challenging long-term defense commitments, Beijing senses opportunity. Analysts within the PLA begin exploring scenarios where U.S. unpredictability offers a window to consolidate regional influence. Then there's technology policy, the area where the America Party exerts perhaps the most transformative pressure. With many of its candidates coming from Silicon Valley or adjacent ecosystems, they bring a radically different approach to digital regulation. They oppose sweeping state surveillance, but also resist expansive regulatory frameworks that might stifle innovation. They're libertarian in instinct, yet fiercely pro-technology in outlook. The result is a wave of new legislation that traditional parties struggle to interpret. One America Party-backed bill seeks to define data ownership as a human right, proposing the equivalent of a digital bill of rights. Another bill attempts to formally recognize decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, as legal entities capable of contracts and taxation. Wall Street is confused. The IRS panics. European regulators shake their heads. Yet, amid the chaos, there's innovation. International startups begin relocating to America to take advantage of its new crypto-friendly legal zones. Musk himself proposes a digital commons accords, inviting tech-forward nations to co-create frameworks for AI alignment, decentralized finance, and cross-border identity standards. Brazil and Singapore express interest. The EU hesitates. China mocks. Meanwhile, climate policy becomes a flashpoint. Some in the America Party support aggressive carbon taxation and geoengineering R&D. Others oppose climate regulation entirely. The internal debate goes public, broadcast in real time through debates on X, with thousands of followers voting on proposed amendments. It's messy, loud, and wildly non-traditional. But here's the twist: it works. A climate bill cobbled together by this chaotic caucus, part tech utopia, part libertarian tax code, part geoengineering moonshot, passes narrowly. It funds small-scale carbon capture startups, permits modular nuclear pilot programs, and offers crypto incentives for low-emissions logistics networks. It's not the Green New Deal. It's not GOP deregulation. It's something new. As these policies unfold, America's allies struggle to keep up. The G7 begins talking about interoperability with U.S. digital legislation. The IMF studies tokenized currencies more seriously. NATO strategists start incorporating legislative volatility into their modeling. Because whether they like it or not, the America Party's rise has injected software-style thinking into global policy: agile, adaptive, open source. But every action has a reaction. Russia and China begin framing the America Party as proof of Western decline, arguing that billionaire-led populism exposes the flaws of liberal democracy. Propaganda outlets point to America's dysfunction, its live-streamed arguments, its factional fragmentation. And not all their criticisms are false. The world is watching a great experiment unfold, one that could either reboot the operating system of democracy or send it crashing into incoherence. Inside the U.S., public sentiment is shifting. Younger voters are increasingly aligned with the America Party's ethos, if not all its policies. Older voters remain skeptical. The media is polarized, unsure whether to treat Musk's movement as reform or demagoguery. Polls show that while approval of Congress remains low, approval of disruptive accountability is rising. Americans are tired of gridlock, and disruption, even messy, is better than nothing. Which brings us to an uncomfortable realization. The America Party, for all its unpredictability, may be laying the groundwork for a new kind of political software stack. One that prioritizes transparency over process, speed over tradition, digital native thinking over legacy ideology. It's not always coherent. It's not always democratic in the classical sense. But it reflects the system it's born from: an internet-saturated, attention-fragmented, radically impatient 21st century America. Up next, we'll zoom in on this tension. Is the America Party fixing what's broken, or just breaking it differently? Can any movement led by tech billionaires ever truly serve democratic values? Or does governance need to be shielded from disruption in order to function? Let's dig deeper. By now, the America Party is no longer a novelty. It is a disruptive presence, not only reshaping how legislation is negotiated, but redefining the expectations of what a political party should be in the 21st century. But disruption is not the same as governance. And as the party's influence grows, so does the complexity of evaluating its impact. Are we witnessing the birth of a necessary evolution in American democracy? Or are we walking into a destabilizing era where unpredictability is power? Let's examine the risks and rewards that define this new political phenomenon, using a matrix that breaks down its most probable outcomes into upside and downside columns. The goal here isn't to decide whether the America Party is good or bad, but to understand what's at stake when a new political force holds disproportionate leverage without the ballast of traditional institutional experience. 1. Legislative leverage and reform. Upside. One of the most compelling arguments in favor of the America Party is its potential to break legislative gridlock. By inserting itself between two increasingly polarized parties, it has forced both Democrats and Republicans to consider new compromises. Some budget bills pass on time. Debt ceiling negotiations are no longer hostage to intra-party drama, but now require the engagement of an ideologically diverse third player. Fiscal responsibility returns to the spotlight, not as a rhetorical tool, but as a policy requirement. The America Party's obsession with real-time transparency has led to the adoption of open-source budget trackers, forcing the public to care more about what the government spends and where it flows. Downside. This leverage, however, comes at a cost. Major legislation risks being delayed or entirely derailed if it doesn't align with the narrow priorities of a handful of America Party representatives. What happens when a natural disaster hits and emergency funding becomes a bargaining chip? Or when national security legislation depends on the whims of a party still defining its ideological boundaries? The gridlock hasn't ended. It's just migrated to a new fault line. 2. Public trust and political engagement. Upside. For a generation raised on disillusionment with traditional politics, the America Party represents engagement. Its digital town halls, Twitter debates, and real-time polling bring voters into the process in a way the traditional parties never bothered to attempt. Young voters, in particular, feel that they finally have a political vehicle that speaks their language, both literally and ideologically. Trust in institutions might be eroding, but trust in individuals, especially Musk, remains oddly resilient among large segments of the population. Downside. Here's the troubling edge. If politics becomes a popularity contest on social media, then governance is at the mercy of virality. Important but boring issues, tax code reform, disaster preparedness, judicial appointments, struggle to gain attention. There's also the risk of personal branding overtaking public service. Are America Party candidates working for the people or for retweets, token donations, and Musk's approval? When public engagement is filtered through entertainment algorithms, is it really public participation or a new form of digital manipulation? 3. Innovation in governance norms. Upside. The America Party challenges the assumption that the only way to legislate is through outdated systems. Their push for digital ID systems, blockchain-backed voting audits, and AI-enhanced transparency tools is pushing Congress, kicking and screaming, into the modern age. Bureaucratic inefficiency, long accepted as inevitable, is finally being called out and attacked with the same fervor that Silicon Valley once brought to analog industries. Some of it works. Congressional committee hearings begin experimenting with decentralized archiving. Constituents can now view their representatives' voting patterns, donations, and even lobbying meetings in real time. It feels like a political OS update. Downside. But governance is not a startup. It can't pivot every quarter. It can't beta test basic rights. And when mistakes happen, say, when an experimental AI tool used for policy prediction accidentally generates racist outputs, or when a decentralized feedback app is hijacked by trolls, the consequences are measured not in user churn, but in broken public trust. What the America Party views as innovation, others see as recklessness. 4. Global signal effects. Upside. Internationally, the rise of the America Party has inspired movements in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. In Germany, a civic tech alliance party launches with backing from tech entrepreneurs. In India, local parties begin using Musk-style micro-funding campaigns to challenge national incumbents. Around the world, younger political actors look to the America Party and see possibility. They see that a disruptive insurgency doesn't require a military coup. It just requires momentum, media savvy, and a deep skepticism of existing power. Downside: autocrats are watching too, and learning different lessons. In Russia and China, the chaos of the American system is held up as a cautionary tale. State media points to the America Party's influence and frames it as evidence that democracy is inherently unstable. Worse, some authoritarian leaders begin emulating the surface features, digital engagement, populist rhetoric, without embracing any of the underlying democratic norms. They copy the form, not the function. So where does that leave us? In many ways, we're standing in a political no man's land. The America Party has succeeded in exposing the fragility of old systems, but has not yet proven it can replace them with something better. It is a party still in the middle of its own identity crisis: libertarian or technocratic, disruptive or constructive. Is it a means to restore governance, or a Trojan horse for billionaire ambition? What cannot be denied is its influence. It now shapes legislation, media narratives, public expectations, and the strategic calculations of global actors. That is no small thing. Even if it collapses under its own contradictions tomorrow, it will have changed the course of American political history. But if it survives, if it grows into a stable fixture, then we may be witnessing the birth of a fundamentally different operating model for democracy in the digital age. Next, we'll dive into a speculative future. What if the America Party becomes the decisive pivot for multiple election cycles? What happens when it becomes the default power broker, not just a disruptor, but the core around which governance revolves? At this point in our journey, we've moved beyond hypotheticals. The America Party is no longer just a disruptive force. It has become the gravitational center around which the machinery of Congress must now rotate. And that raises a bigger, more existential question for democracy. What if this third party, backed by Elon Musk's money, media reach, and influence, becomes the decisive pivot of U.S. power, not just in one cycle, but across many? What if the future of governance becomes contingent not on traditional party platforms or institutional loyalty, but on the unpredictable leverage of a narrow, highly coordinated insurgency? This is our what-if moment. A deep dive into the potential consequences if the America Party embeds itself as the new permanent swing vote in Congress, able to make or break legislation, confirm or reject nominations, and frame every national debate through its own priorities. Let's paint the scenario in sharper lines. In 2028, just 2 years after its first major breakthrough, the America Party expands its footprint. Riding on high digital engagement, Musk's funding network, and strong anti-establishment sentiment among younger voters, it secures 4 Senate seats and 12 House districts. None of these wins are by landslides. Most are razor-thin victories in politically volatile regions, but that's all it needs. The party now holds the balance of power in both chambers. Neither the Democrats nor Republicans can pass major legislation without the America Party's blessing. This new dynamic rewrites everything. 1. Procedural power becomes substance. For years, political observers have warned about procedural bottlenecks: the filibuster, the budget reconciliation process, the gridlock in committee systems. But under a third-party power structure, procedure becomes the primary arena of influence. The America Party doesn't need to write every bill. It doesn't even need a majority. All it has to do is threaten to withhold support. Suddenly, every committee chair from both parties starts negotiating with them in advance. Defense bills, infrastructure proposals, regulatory reforms. All of it gets filtered through the America Party's demands. And those demands? Often unpredictable. 1 week it's AI regulation. The next, it's crypto banking access. Then, a proposal for universal internet access via satellite-funded vouchers. The other parties scramble to adapt. The Democrats try to pull the America Party leftward by offering green tech tax credits. The Republicans pitch crypto, deregulation, and anti-censorship laws. But the America Party doesn't commit ideologically. It trades like a hedge fund. Its loyalty is transactional, not traditional. 2. The media becomes the real chamber of debate. In the old world, legislation was hashed out in hearings, markups, and late-night floor votes. But now, the real negotiations happen on social media. Every amendment is previewed in Twitter threads. Every vote is preceded by online polling. Every political misstep is amplified in real time by Musk's personal account, or drowned in sarcasm by his meme army. This media dynamic doesn't just reshape public perception. It redefines policy itself. Proposals that trend online, whether serious or ridiculous, get fast-tracked for discussion. Politicians in both legacy parties start mimicking the America Party style: meme-laced policy briefs, live-stream Q&As, real-time voting dashboards. Transparency, once a slow bureaucratic process, is now crowdsourced and aggressively immediate. It excites some, terrifies others. Supporters hail it as democratization. Critics call it policymaking by popularity contest. 3. Foreign governments rethink their U.S. strategy. America's allies and adversaries have always studied Washington's political chessboard, but the emergence of a new swing party introduces wildcards into diplomatic strategy. Foreign leaders can no longer rely on the usual gatekeepers. A defense agreement with the U.S.? It needs to pass the America Party's litmus test first. Trade deals? Subject to public scrutiny via real-time votes on the party's digital platform. Intelligence cooperation? Now filtered through ideological trust rather than institutional tradition. China and Russia adapt quickly. Their state media use the America Party as proof of U.S. instability. How can a democracy function, they ask, when it hinges on the whims of a billionaire? Europe, meanwhile, is split. Some governments, Estonia, Finland, Portugal, begin meeting directly with America Party leaders, bypassing the State Department entirely. Others caution against giving unelected influencers too much diplomatic weight. 4. A new political generation rises. Every action has its reaction, and the America Party, for all its leverage, does not exist in a vacuum. By 2030, a new wave of political movements emerges, some mimicking its tactics, others rebelling against its perceived technocracy. In Texas, a progressive labor AI party gains traction by arguing that tech billionaires cannot be trusted with governance. In Montana, a neo-populist alliance calls for banning algorithmic influence in elections. And in Silicon Valley itself, an internal split fractures the America Party between those who want more radical reform, e.g. programmable money, blockchain ballots, and those who seek mainstream influence. This fragmentation might weaken the America Party's cohesion, but it also shows that its disruption has changed the DNA of U.S. politics. No party can now ignore digital platforms, decentralized policy tools, or real-time voter engagement. The age of slow politics is over. 5. Long-term democratic consequences. Let's step back. What happens when the swing vote of a superpower is held by a party created on social media, funded by one of the world's richest men, and guided more by engineering logic than constitutional tradition? There are two dominant schools of thought. The optimist view: this is necessary evolution. Institutions must be retooled for the digital era. The America Party is a beta version of future governance, more transparent, more agile, more accountable. By forcing compromise and decentralization, it revitalizes democracy. The pessimist view: this is political plutocracy. Power has shifted from voters to followers, from deliberation to spectacle, from institutional checks to algorithmic feedback loops. The long arc of democracy is not being updated, it's being hijacked. Neither view is fully right, but both are instructive. The reality likely sits somewhere in the messy middle, an age of experimentation, volatility, and recalibration. The system is being stress-tested, possibly for the better, but not without risk. So here we are, standing at the edge of a new political era, staring into a landscape reshaped not by civil war, not by revolution, but by a third-party launch from a billionaire's social media poll. The America Party, if it continues to grow and cement its influence, will not just rewrite congressional math. It will rewrite the rules of representation, power, and political legitimacy in the United States. But let's take a step back and ask the essential question of this episode. What if Elon Musk's America Party upends Congress? Because the consequences are not confined to Capitol Hill. They ripple across the economy, into culture, into governance norms that, until now, felt immovable. This is more than a new party. It's a prototype for a new kind of political software, coded not in ideology, but in influence, funding velocity, platform control, and real-time data. What happens when the United States legislative bottlenecks can be unlocked or frozen at the will of a small, unpredictable, billionaire-backed caucus? Let's break it down. First, the legislative implications. With even 2 or 3 Senate seats, the America Party can effectively make or break key legislation. Think about this in practical terms. If Musk's representatives are in place during a major budget debate, a debt ceiling vote, or a foreign aid package, they can decide whether that package passes or fails, not through obstruction alone, but through negotiation and potentially through public spectacle. Imagine every spending bill becoming a public stream, live-streamed on X, voted on by a digital focus group, filtered through meme campaigns, shaped in real time by trends rather than closed-door deliberations. That's not just unconventional. It's the dismantling of how American governance has worked for generations. Second, the power of political narrative shifts dramatically. Instead of long campaign trails and legacy media interviews, we could see policy launches done via viral threads. Instead of press conferences, we might get emoji-laden cryptic posts that send markets, legislators, and even foreign leaders scrambling to interpret intent. This isn't theory, it's already started. In 2025, Musk's post about Ukraine aid led to congressional debates being postponed after public opinion polls on X shifted drastically in just 48 hours. In 2026, it could be worse. If a Musk-aligned senator signals disapproval of a cybersecurity bill, it may tank investor confidence before any official statement is released. Third, governance norms erode in favor of tech logic. Let's be clear. Musk and his inner circle do not operate like traditional politicians. They don't believe in slow consensus. They optimize for efficiency, disruption, engineering problem-solving, and speed. That mindset might sound refreshing, until applied to the messy, contradictory, pluralistic ecosystem of U.S. governance. Democracy doesn't run like a rocket company. It runs like a constitutional orchestra, slow, diverse, often disharmonious, but carefully constructed to absorb dissent and still function. By inserting tech logic into the center of power, we risk replacing governance with versioning. Politics becomes a product with regular updates, glitches, forced rollbacks, and no guarantee of backward compatibility. And that brings us to foreign affairs. Other countries are watching. Beijing, Moscow, Brussels, they all study U.S. institutions for weakness. And when the balance of power appears to rest in the hands of a single unelected billionaire's influence, that's a gift to authoritarian narratives. It fuels the argument that democracy is performative, fragile, or easily manipulated by the few. Even allies become cautious. NATO members wonder if U.S. security guarantees can be trusted when legislation passes or fails based on Musk's mood. Trade partners worry about deals being tweeted away overnight. And UN diplomacy becomes a sideshow when the real decisions get announced from an X-space audio room. But now, let's address the other side, the optimistic vision. What if the America Party becomes a model for more agile, responsive, accountable politics? It's not inconceivable. Imagine a world where every bill is explained in plain language, debated in public, and shaped by real-time citizen feedback. Where the budget is no longer a 2,000-page mystery, but an open-source document. Where elected officials answer directly to their digital constituencies every week, not every 4 years. That kind of transparency could re-engage the 50% of Americans who don't vote. It could make Congress relevant again for digital natives who currently think of politics as a boomer sport. It might even force legacy parties to become more honest, more efficient, and more responsive. That's the paradox. The America Party might be both a symptom of democratic erosion and a path to democratic rejuvenation. It could fracture the system or fix it. And that brings us to our ultimate question. What if Elon Musk's America Party doesn't just upend Congress, but becomes the blueprint for how future political systems are built? What if nation-states begin aligning around influencer-led coalitions instead of traditional parties? What if the next generation of leaders isn't forged in the Senate, but on streaming platforms and algorithmic loyalty networks? Are we ready for a political system that runs at the speed of code and chaos? Or are we inviting instability that even democracy's strongest institutions won't survive? There are no easy answers. But this is the reality we're hurtling toward. And the only certainty? Politics will never look the same again. Coming up next on What If Horizons. What if Bitcoin becomes the US reserve currency and the dollar dies? Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and let us know your thoughts. Would you vote for a third party powered by an influencer? Or is that a bridge too far? Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.